Hi, everyone. Welcome to Impacts at the Meter. Really excited to be here at the Open Source Summit remotely and to tell you a little bit about the OpenEEmeter, which is a project that is near and dear to my heart. I've been building this with a team at LF Energy and at Recurve, where I work. And excited to show you a little bit about how it works, the kind of problems that it solves, and why we're open source, and what it might mean for you. So I'm going to jump right in. This is going to be a fairly quick presentation, just to kind of give you the overview of where this fits in. There are a lot of very cool LF Energy projects out there, many of which are presenting at this summit, and I'd encourage you to go see as many of those presentations as you can. So let me go ahead and sort of open this with a discussion, which is at the center of any problem that, or at the center of any solution that is kind of being proposed here, is discussion of climate change. This is why we're here. There are a lot of potential avenues into solutions for climate change, and each one of them is as important as the next. And these problems are wide-reaching. There are a lot of energy users, and there are a lot of things that affect our climate. We'll get into this a little bit more, but the OpenEEmeter helps tackle only a small part of this. And naturally, with such a big kind of problem, no one solution is ever really going to be so we're going to need lots of things helping us to achieve our climate goals, and that starts at the nation state level, and it goes it is going to have to reach into every part of our lives, probably. And it's going to require a lot of innovation. And there are a lot of technologies being developed to change the way that we generate energy and the way that we consume energy. The thing that we're going to be talking a little bit more about today are buildings. Buildings cover the earth, and buildings are used for so many different things, ranging from industrial, processes to commercial outfits, and of every type imaginable, as well as residences, single-family, multifamily buildings. Each of these are subject to the conditions of the world, and try to create an environment and give us the tools to live our lives and to get things done. And they're extremely important, and they use a lot of energy. And the OpenEEmeter helps us to understand how to quantify the impacts of energy on buildings. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me talk a little bit more first about kind of one other side of this, which I think is relevant to an understanding of why the OpenEEmeter exists. So grid problems are multifaceted. There are a number of factors that you have to consider when trying to change the way that the grid operates. And that starts from the basic problem of needing to meet generation with supply or with demand, meeting supply of these resources with demand. And really there are two prongs to any approach that may affect the grid. One is to change the way that energy is generated. Another one, and the one that's more relevant to the OpenEEmeter, is to change the way that energy is consumed. There are many approaches for that. But both of these come together in energy grids, which are complicated and include things like peak energy usage periods, weather events, which affect grid usage. So there was a day, I live in California, there was a day in California last year when to buy a megawatt of power, which usually costs around $30 US, cost over $1,000 on the grid spot market. And these times which are most energy intensive for the grid are also the times which are most carbon intensive for our planet. And furthermore, anybody who has been around in the last 8 to 9 months knows that we're in a global pandemic, and that has also affected the way that the grid needs to supply energy to buildings as people change their habits to respect stay-at-home orders. So naturally, in a complicated, in a complex sphere, there are also going to be a range of kind of technologies or approaches for fixing the problems that arise. And many of these you've heard of, maybe some of these you haven't, but these are all trying to take a chunk out of a separate aspect of this problem. Just to kind of go through some of these, if you want to affect demand, one way to change that demand is to change how much it costs, is to change the price of energy. Another way is to install solar panels at a site or in generation. By the way, what I'm focusing on here are some of the solutions which focus a little bit more on the demand side. So you could install solar panels at a specific building. You could install batteries. Increasingly, batteries are being used to support the grid, not only at utilities, but also distributed at sites around the grid. So individual building owners can use batteries to consume energy when it's less carbon intensive or less expensive for the grid, and to rely on their batteries stored power to shift load from certain times of day to other times of day when it's less impactful. There are programs which send signals to users, and we'll talk a little bit more about demand response programs that ask people to turn off large appliances or industrial processes at particular times of day when there are extreme weather events, which will only become more frequent in the future. And then there are a whole host of approaches for improving the efficiency of buildings. At the industrial scale, that may be something like changing compressors on refrigeration or freezing equipment. At the commercial scale, that may be, changing all of the light bulbs in an industrial, in a warehouse, or in a grocery store. And for residences, it might mean anything from changing insulation to installing new appliances, changing light bulbs. There are a vast variety of approaches here, and it's important to remember when we're thinking about how to apply these that they have to work together, and that some of these will have advantages where others struggle. Let me give a really quick example of that. What you're looking at here is a load curve that's showing over the course of the day the increase in energy usage and or at least the consumption on the California energy grid. And the blue line is the overall electric load, and the orange line is that load subtracting out the solar and the wind generation. So what you're actually seeing is that in the middle of the day, there's a lot of solar and wind generation. And as the day winds down, and as people and businesses kind of switch from the end of their workday to the start of their evenings, that there's this ramp when the sun is going down and the usage is going and the demand is going up. And you get a really steep uptick in the amount of energy that's required, and really critical to consider because the addition of solar and wind resources actually creates a moment for the grid which is more intense than any other moment, which is that slope there, that high rising slope, which is which is costly for grid operators and very carbon intensive because it requires the types of generation that can handle a fast increase like that are generally speaking more carbon intensive. So as we consider the types of things that need to happen to the grid, we have to consider their impacts not only on the overall load, but also the times of day of that load, the location of that load, and the whole grid context. So back to, I think, something that's become a mantra. And there's definitely some truth to this. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Why is this relevant? We need to understand, if we make an attempt to change the way that energy is consumed on the grid, that it's important to understand that effect, the impact of that effect, in particular, what sorts of companies and technologies or programs are most effective at accomplishing their goals, what works well, what helps the grid and what doesn't help the grid, and how will that change as the grid changes. What are the marginal impacts? Where are programs designed to impact demand on the grid effective where we hope that they will be, and during the times of day that we hope that there will be? To the extent that capital is available for investment, either from the public or private sector, where should that capital be invested, and how can it be known that that is a wise investment? How do we promote innovation in the space? All of these things require measuring impacts, and that is where the OpenEEmeter comes in. The timing is right here. In the US, we're seeing greater than 60%, last I heard, I'm sure it's higher than that now, greater than 60% coverage of smart meters, where previously we did not have hourly data. Now we have lots of data, more than many entities can handle. And that data tells in great detail patterns of usage, even down to the site level. And that data is very valuable for understanding the impacts of programs or technologies or solutions deployed to fix demand or supply problems on the grid. So what's hard about measuring things? Spoiler alert, this is where the OpenEEmeter will come in. But some of the things that I've run across personally, a lot of data is incomplete. It's missing big sections because of power outages, or it's mishandled during data transfers, or one issue is that there are lots of different ways of measuring impact. How do you measure it? What are the methods you use, and what do those optimize for? What variables are you taking into account? Who can go in and check that the methods that you use to compute the impact of an event or a program are what you say they are? So having the ability to reproduce results is extremely important, as is the ability to do that at scale, to take an analysis and repeat it for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of meters across a nation or a state or a jurisdiction. How do you do that while respecting the privacy of the individuals whose data or whose company's data is required for that analysis? And how do you take account of all of the multiple things that are being done as interventions on the grid, including behavioral programs, as well as solar installations, energy efficiency, demand response, and all of that while taking account of the changes of energy usage that have occurred during the course of this global pandemic? These are not easy problems, and that's where it is helpful to have software that helps make some of these easier. So a quick side note, the OpenEEmeter, EE stands for energy efficiency. Oops. As time has grown, it's been clear that the OpenEEmeter is useful for much more than just energy efficiency, and I want to give you a little example of that, which is just a taste of where we can go in the future, and there will be some suggestions about where you might go after this near the end of these slides. So first, let me talk about demand response. It's critical to understand the impact of a demand response event, and what you're looking at here is a load shape over the course of a day. And on the very bottom, what you're seeing is the impact to usage in terms of percentages. And the analysis that needs to go into that. You'll see that there are kind of 4 different event time series that go into this, and each of these is made possible by by the OpenEEmeter, which takes into account the time, the usage during the time of day as it might have occurred without an event, as compared to what actually happened during that event, and additionally subtracts out a set of comparisons in order to balance out the effect of any bias in the modeling. This is one example of one way in which the OpenEEmeter is being used for something which is not just energy efficiency, but which is isolating the effect of a particular demand response event, even on top of energy efficiency. And I'd love to talk more about this. Please feel free to reach out to me. The OpenEEmeter is built on, is really a foundation for doing the sort of analysis which I was hinting at. And the keys to this software package are that the methods within are replicable, it's written in code, it's open source, it's part of the Linux Foundation, because we're committed to that and that community. It's transparent. It's of course, each of these things is a sliding scale, and the OpenEEmeter is always trying to make things as easy as possible for users to understand. And part of the foundation of the OpenEEmeter is the creation of site level seasonal and time of week and temperature baseline models. Now what that means is the OpenEEmeter gives you a model of how a building performs under a particular set of circumstances based on meter data, as well as temperature data and time of week. And this is the core component from which all OpenEEmeter analysis is performed. That this model is used to predict the usage patterns of a building in circumstances which did not actually occur, and we call that a counterfactual. It's as if we wish we could split the universe at the point of an event and watch what would have happened with that event and what would have happened and what did happen without that event. But unfortunately, we're not able to do that given the constraints of the physical world. And when an event happens, that's all that happens. And the OpenEEmeter provides a way of estimating what might have happened in the absence of that event. And that is a powerful concept which comes together in a number of different situations with combinations of different models to isolate the various effects of energy efficiency, demand response, or storage and load shifting programs. And all of that is available in the OpenEEmeter. Let me talk just briefly about the use cases that those enable. So in particular, we're starting with pay for performance. So as companies and innovators sign up for the opportunity to show that their approach to affecting the grid has impact that they're willing to bet their paycheck on, that having open source and reliable methods becomes all the more important. This becomes important for the people who are hoping to procure grid impacts of a particular sort and who are hoping to invest in this. And as whenever money gets involved, it's important to also have performance insurance and to understand the impacts of those events. Finally, who uses the OpenEEmeter? This is built on standard, widely used libraries. It's a Python. OpenEEmeter is a Python library built on top of pandas and stats models, which should be familiar to many of the data scientists in the crowd. it's possible to get started with even just data from a single site. So we try to make it as easy as possible to get going with the OpenEEmeter. You need not be a utility to use this. You can be someone like me who gets a utility bill and wants to understand how my energy use is changing over time. And it's built on top of public weather sources. And now there's a little hint of how you would use it in Python, just a little code snippet for you. Thanks for being here. I would love for you to go and learn a little bit more about the OpenEEmeter at the LF Energy site, or follow us on GitHub. Get involved, come to our meetups, join our mailing lists. I'm the author of the OpenEEmeter, and I work at Recurve, which incubated and launched the OpenEEmeter, and would be happy to answer any questions either remotely or through the facilitators here. So thank you.